The internet has this compulsion to label every facet of human culture, no matter how small. Every plot device and character trope, every tiny sliver of the TikTok algorithm, every type of human interaction is inevitably demystified with a name. Ironically, we can't seem to agree what this trend should be called. I've heard it called aestheticization and namecore, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to call it vibes culture. Vibes culture has been widely discussed in relation to online fashion, where it feels like new trends pop into existence without warning, without reason, only to vanish a week later. But make no mistake, the roots run deep. My generation was the first to be raised with ubiquitous social media, and it seems like we've started to think and speak in tags. A few weeks ago, I happened across a website that presents this trend in its pure, most distilled form. This place takes vibes culture, which has been quietly shaping the internet for a decade, and thrusts it into the spotlight. It takes all of social media's inclinations and turns them into codified laws, actual hardline rules, so that talking and thinking in tags is the whole point. It's called the Aesthetics Wiki, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a community of users trying to ascribe names to every artistic style humanly conceivable across every domain: fashion, design, digital art. The wiki's users research these trends, build pages for each one, and give them names if no one has yet. So the look of a foggy forest becomes a gloom core, fuzzy cartoon screenshots become faded memory core, and so on. There's virtually no limit to what can be described this way. So as you can imagine, the wiki has been steadily growing. When I started writing this video, there were 800 pages, and now there are 839. By the time you watch this, it might be in the thousands. I'm willing to bet you haven't heard of most of them, and honestly, some are hard to describe even if you have. Their dedication to this unending task reminds me most of all of Mogai, the queer community whose members have come up with thousands of abstract gender and sexuality labels. You may or may not remember me from when I chronicled that movement in my first video essay, Millions of Dead Genders, a Mogai Retrospective. When I came across the Aesthetics Wiki, I was basically ready to dismiss it as more of the same. Just another online counterculture with bold plans for the future, but no chance of pulling them off. The reasonable thing to do would be to shrug and walk away. So naturally, I read it. I read the whole wiki, and I gotta say, I wasn't ready. This is a whole other beast. On my first day, I made my way down the wiki's index, resolving to read every article from abstract tech to zombie core. I built a spreadsheet to categorize every page, and I filled it in as I went. Each aesthetic got a year of origin, a primary motif to describe its most important trait, and then a secondary motif to act as a modifier. For example, atom punk emerged in the 1950s. Its primary motif is US traditional, because it's all about wealth and suburban white families. Its secondary motif is futurism, because it imagines that family in outer space. I also logged whether an aesthetic was incoherent, meaning the things it described didn't have much in common, and whether it was redundant, meaning another page describes the same thing but does a better job. So atom punk is not incoherent because its traits are easy to recognize, but it is redundant because there's already a page for retrofuturism, which to me seems like the same thing. When I started, there were 681 pages in the index. That's not actually every page on the wiki, but I had no way to find the rest. I'm not sure how much I would have learned reading them anyway, because for every established artistic style on the wiki, there are two more that are meaningless or impossible to pin down. I go and I'm like 5 in and I see that Acid Pixie molds together elements of biopunk, void punk, and specific elements of new goth and indie. And the picture is this. What am I supposed to do with this? Like, did the person who made this even know what they were writing? There's a lot of like fluorescent colors, but then there's also a lot of dark colors and a lot of muted colors, a lot of like warped digital effects, but then also some stuff from like the 80s. Oh, this is just nothing. This isn't anything. I planned to spend 2 or 3 days on this, but it quickly started to feel like it would take the rest of my life. I'm only human. It's tough to process 200 new ideas in a day. And with a lot of the aesthetics so indistinct, I found myself getting sidetracked. I spent countless hours comparing pages, asking myself, Is there a difference between wetcore and soggy? Is there something I'm missing here? Or did two people just like when it rains outside? Day 2. My brain is soup. Might give up. This is Donut, by the way.
Hi.
Hi. By day 3, I was seeing the world in vibes. When I closed my eyes at night, I saw a spreadsheet dotted with words like witchy and Y2K. One morning, my partner dressed up in a really cute outfit, and all I could think to say was, wow, you look so Hobbit-core right now. Just finished the 350th entry with about 300 to go. I'm noticing that my carpal tunnel is flaring up from all the typing. I'm just getting this radiating pain in my arms and my hands. I've started to wonder why I'm doing this, but it feels too late to back down now. Sometimes you gotta suffer for your art, you know? I really believe in this project of reading 700 articles written by teenagers. On the final day, I turned on my webcam to record and realized I couldn't put my feelings into words because every adjective in the English language was running through my head. Instead of talking, I just ate my leftover quesadilla in a silent daze. Oh God, is that what I look like when I'm eating? Jesus. This process was miserable. I cannot recommend it. But I did, at the very least, come away with a better understanding of why this community exists and what purpose it serves. So going into this project, I expected to wade through hundreds of brand new styles dreamed up by young artists. I figured you could only get to 800 aesthetics by coming up with most of them yourself. And honestly, that's what sold me on reading the wiki. The prospect of hundreds of new art movements is pretty sick. But it turns out I was way off. Within my first hour of reading, it became clear that while these aesthetic labels are new, the actual styles they describe tend to be decades old. To show you what I mean, let's take a look at the 4 most popular pages on the wiki. Here they are. In first place, we've got Frutiger Arrow, which is apparently blowing up this year. Frutiger Arrow describes the iconic look of 2000s tech and user interfaces. You know it when you see it. It's the classic Windows Vista look, very rounded, heavy on the greens and blues. The aesthetic scene obviously didn't invent this since it's like 15 years old, but from what I can tell, they were the first ones to give it a name. The second is Y2K, a pretty similar vibe, but a little broader. The idea of grouping this whole era of art and culture into a single label, that's pretty new. In the same way that we don't describe everything coming out now as 2023 core, but the media itself dates back to, well, you know. The third is the most unique of the bunch. Weirdcore is an aesthetic involving amateurish edits of old point-and-shoot photos. It's based on early internet visuals, so it's not totally original, but its exact sensibilities and styles are pretty new. Weirdcore is up there with Vaporwave as one of this movement's undeniable cultural exports, and I think it's pretty interesting. I'll have more to say on it later. And fourth is cottagecore, which is so ubiquitous it hardly feels worth defining. You know, it's about living a quiet life in the idyllic countryside. We all like this. Another long-established thing that the internet solidified with a name. So 3 of the 4 are older than the wiki. Reading these articles, and all the other ones, it became clear to me that the Aesthetics Wiki is not an art project. It doesn't revolve around bold new art. It doesn't expand the possibilities of aesthetics. That's not a criticism, it's just not what they're trying to do. Even though I had never heard of most of the names in the index, once I actually had a look at the pages, the art being described was very familiar. Most aesthetics have long lists of media that suit them, with the media generally years older than the category. So I wasn't familiar with dark nautical, which was apparently coined this decade. But I do know about H.P. Lovecraft and Moby Dick and Return of the Obra Dinn. The categories generally aren't part of the creative process. They don't usually help the art get made. It feels important to note that the Aesthetics Wiki skews really young. You can tell from the writing style and general youthfulness of the aesthetics. But my favorite sign is that they think everything originated in the last 20 years. The wiki says that the American oil and gas industry started under George W. Bush, and that it was only in the 2010s that people started enjoying food. It's not a big deal. It's mostly cute. These are people venturing into the world for the first time, so a lot of older stuff is new to them, and it can be really helpful to place that stuff in a historical and cultural context. Reading the wiki is also a low-risk way to figure out what appeals to you, what kind of context you might want to live in. It's interesting, though, that this is only happening now in the 2020s. Young people have always wanted to understand their place in the world, but nothing remotely like the wiki existed 40 years ago or even 10 years ago when it easily would have been possible. So what changed? I have a couple theories for why the wiki started in 2018 and picked up steam in the early pandemic. But let me just say, these are really just my own theories. I feel pretty good about them. I prepped by reading 13 essays and articles. Or 694 if you count the wiki, but this is not a hard science. I can't prove any of this for sure. My opinions do not represent the views of my employer. With all that said, I wonder if the Aesthetics Wiki was needed until recently. Cultures used to be a lot more local, a lot more regional, so it was easier to keep up. You could pick up most of what you needed to know from the world around you. In most cases, the music you listened to was the music you could find. The clothes you wore were the clothes for sale. And sure, you knew there were other ways to dress and other bands to listen to, but they weren't constantly at your fingertips the way they are now. The ability to access culture at all was a major barrier that's basically vanished for anyone who can read a common language. Since we each have so much say in our media diets now, the mainstream has shrunk substantially, and the zeitgeist is occupied by a million little niches. Now it's easy to come by media that's totally unfamiliar to you, that none of your existing language accounts for. And in situations like that, what's the word for this? Is an understandable question. Cultural trends are less ubiquitous than they used to be. They move so much faster, and since people's media diets are so varied, they can be hard to actually recognize. On that level, it's kind of no wonder vibes culture only emerged in the last decade. The world has never felt so big or confusing. People have a deep need to understand what's happening around them, and naming new aesthetic trends they notice can be a part of that. Although, okay, what is an aesthetic trend? What is an aesthetic at all? There seems to be a big generational divide in how people use that word. If you're over 30 or 35, there's a good chance my usage has been confusing. Young people today think of aesthetics far more broadly than we used to. Historically, an aesthetic has been a set of principles and sensibilities that guide a creative movement. For example, these two paintings share an aesthetic because they employ the same techniques for the same reason. Beyond how the paintings look, it's about what they consider beautiful or what they consider interesting. When I was on Tumblr in the mid-2010s, the meaning had started expanding substantially. So an aesthetic was any set of visuals that look similar on some level, even if they aren't driven by the same creative principles. For example, the wiki considers these two images to be pale grunge because they both feature lots of black and white, even though the similarities basically end there. And it's only gotten broader since. These days, an aesthetic can be defined by as little as one person's vague association between pieces of media, even if they actually don't have much in common. A lot of the new groupings are totally subjective. Anything that makes you feel lonely shares an aesthetic. Anything that reminds you of the year 2000 shares an aesthetic. Anything that you personally enjoy shares an aesthetic. Naturally, these things will usually have at least some qualities in common, like pictures that make you feel lonely also tend to be empty, open spaces, but it's not a must. As long as two things can conceivably be experienced in the same way, they can be connected. Since young people understand aesthetics so broadly, the Aesthetics Wiki has taken on a bigger task than it might seem, explaining the entirety of modern life through the lens of visual media, joining together every experience of pain or comfort or confusion, and assuring the reader that there is some irreducible structure to it all, shrinking every mass movement, every endless feed back down to a conceivable scale. It's not that they allow everything. The site's volunteers work hard to remove any aesthetics that don't justify their place in a public database. Most of the time, it's the ones created by some young person trying to solidify their personal brand, like anything Adam likes is Adamcore, you know? Those are still considered aesthetics from what I can tell. They've just been spun off into their own wiki, which the admin tells me is much more hands-off. Most of the pages on the main wiki describe a baby. Yes, they do. She keeps jumping onto the desk, so I'm just going to see how long we can keep this going. Ow! Ow! Okay, well that answers that. Most of the pages on the main wiki describe decades-old art, because it's easier to summarize these things in hindsight. Even the aesthetics that have been coined in the last few years tend to look back instead of looking ahead. Cottagecore has got to be the most famous example, but it's not the only one that harkens back to simpler times. 36 of the pages on the wiki are about childhood. 23 of them are about nostalgia for a time the users had lived through. As you can imagine, there was a lot of overlap there. I found pages like late 2000s elementary school and cozy childhood hideaway that brought me back to times I miss dearly. I get the appeal. It was nice being offered a safe place in all my disorientation, though I think these groupings might be misguided. I'm not convinced entire facets of our childhoods were driven by singular creative principles. This feels really different from this feels really different from this. Things felt that simple to me in the 2000s. That's probably because I was like 8 years old and couldn't pick up on the nuances. The Aesthetics Wiki is a project about simplifying, and often they end up oversimplifying, describing patterns where none really exist, like seeing shapes in TV static. My personal standards are a little stricter than theirs on what counts as an aesthetic. I'm somewhere between the philosophers and the zoomers on this one. Like, if something has an iconic color scheme or shares a lot of symbols, in my books that counts. Is that just because that's the definition that was in use when I was in high school? Yeah, probably. My system here isn't objective by a long shot, but I hope it's still helpful. Anyway, I tagged around a third of the aesthetics I read as incoherent, either because the concept was too broad to flatten into one word, or the motifs being described didn't really come together to form a whole. Some of the pages are also totally real things that just aren't an aesthetic. They're like a feeling or the American Revolution. Note: because we are a wiki about aesthetics, the history of the American Revolution will not be explored in depth. Please read what? Since pages are built based on personal associations and vibes, the examples you see on a page often have little to do with each other. They can come from different scenes. They can be driven by totally different creative sensibilities. Like, a user of the wiki might enjoy both the cyber grunge aesthetic and the indie musician Cavetown, and see some connection between the two. That's totally fine, but it doesn't warrant Cavetown being listed on the page for cyber grunge. It certainly doesn't warrant Cavetown being listed on every page that reminds anyone of his music, from cottagecore to after hours to cryptidcore to goblin academia. Cavetown is mentioned in no fewer than 22 entries on the wiki. I mean no offense by this, but his music is pretty by-the-numbers bedroom pop. There's no way he contributes to that many scenes. So many of the articles don't describe actual movements. They're not a thing, you know? It's like if I took everything on... One second. Guess I'm doing it. It's like if I took everything on the floor of this room right now and labeled it bedroom floor core, and expected that to tell you anything meaningful about what all this stuff is. Garbage can, grabby thing, shoebox, broken iPhone. The fact that they're all on my floor doesn't tell you anything deeper about them. Although it does tell me this room could use a clean. If the goal of these labels is to help people understand culture, I think they're a step in the wrong direction. Most of the newer terms on the wiki can't explain anything. They can't teach anything. They aren't coined based on shared history or deeper creative sensibilities, just vibes. I don't want to be too hard on this wiki. I'm not trying to make a brutal takedown. The community is perfectly nice, and I don't think they're ruining society or anything. I mean, they're not landlords. I have a problem with how they consume and categorize art, but to be fair to them, the art itself is often really solid. So I want to take a minute and tell you about some aesthetics I found that I really enjoyed. First off is hydrogen. It's a colorful take on space exploration. The stuff in this tag reminds me of old sci-fi book covers. They're overwhelming and lonely and really hammer home the vastness of space. I'm not totally convinced it comes together into something cohesive, but it's really cool anyway. The second is the Swenkas subculture of Johannesburg, South Africa. This one isn't new at all, but it was new to me. The Swenkas are working class Zulu men who wear these great old school suits and accessories, and they compete in pageants against each other. It's like executive realness, but for straight guys. I kind of love it. And then one that really resonated with me was trauma core. There's a bit of whiplash here, nothing graphic, but skip ahead like 20 seconds if you don't want to think about vague trauma. Trauma core is yet another page about childhood, but it's the furthest thing from nostalgic. Instead, it contrasts these little Sanrio illustrations with tormented quotes that feel very familiar. It paints a picture of young people dealing with some pretty awful stuff. Some of it's kind of edgy, but on the whole, it really would have made my younger self feel seen, and I appreciate that. The Aesthetics Wiki is meant to be leafed through to some extent until you find something that immediately jumps out at you. Your experience with a given page is probably pretty shallow. You see an image or a term, you go, oh, that's cool. Then you move on with your day and never think about it again. The pages generally don't get you thinking about why people like the aesthetics or why certain imagery triggers certain feelings. To explain, let's jump back to weirdcore, the popular aesthetic we talked about earlier. The wiki page for weirdcore defines it as being, quote, centered around amateur or low-quality photography and/or visual images that have been constructed or edited to convey feelings of confusion, disorientation, dread, alienation, and nostalgia or anemoia. While all this is true, weirdcore doesn't create the vibe by magic. It has a really distinct visual style. I wish the page explored how the images convey confusion, disorientation, and so on. Or why, for that matter. Like, what's the ultimate goal of conveying those feelings? What's being said? The page never really gets into what gives weirdcore its punch. The foundation is these eerily flat old photos caused by the blinding flash of old point-and-shoot cameras. And then the fonts and editing techniques bring me back to the internet of my childhood, where a lot of websites felt off-kilter, like danger could be lurking anywhere. I think weirdcore is cool. Old technology but spooky is a time-tested formula. But I wonder if solidifying weirdcore with a genre name can actually make it harder to talk about why individual pieces work. It invites people to use circular reasoning. Why does this image make you feel comfy yet creeped out? Because it's weirdcore, that's the point. What makes it weirdcore? Because it makes you feel comfy yet creeped out. Why do you like it? Because you like weirdcore. It's kind of a thought-terminating thing that obscures how much skill it takes to create a specific mood. Behind each of these images, there's an artist making choices, and this kind of discussion makes those choices feel arbitrary. The way this stuff is flattened into one word and rarely explored in depth means that communities formed around this art spend fairly little time actually talking about the art. The discussion often ends at deciding a piece fits an aesthetic and adding it to the pile. The relationship to art feels transactional, used as a means to feel something people already wanted to feel. The art is treated as interchangeable content, with thousands of works anonymized and consumed in bulk. When we talk about artworks and styles as finished products without any meaningful creation process, we erase the people who brought them into existence. And I don't mean in the cool death of the author way people are into these days. I mean in a way that measurably hurts marginalized creators. The most egregious example on the wiki is the near total erasure of Black Americans from the styles they helped spawn. 2 pages on the wiki, Bougie and Baddie, were indisputably formed by Black and Latina women, but that cultural origin is mentioned exactly nowhere. The page for Baddie mentions laid edges, hoop earrings, and hair scarves, and who gets credit? If you'll believe it, the Kardashians. The page for Afrofuturism credits the first Afrofuturist visual media to none other than Gene Roddenberry, because the original Star Trek had one Black woman in it. And I mean, Nichelle Nichols gave a legendary performance in Star Trek, but from what I can tell, no serious source has ever described that show as Afrofuturist. The only way I can really see you getting there is if you understand Afrofuturism as shallowly as Black people in space, and seeing that Star Trek technically fits that mold. Beyond being careless and offensive, this practice also results in bad art history that overestimates the influence of white people with PR teams and erases the people who actually drive culture. Artists exist, most of them aren't famous, and their work deserves closer attention than this. I don't know, maybe this is my bias showing. I'm predisposed to not like this because I like approaching art in basically the opposite way. I like taking a single work of art and paying really close attention, trying to figure out what makes it tick. If anything, that's probably the theme of this channel. I spent a week writing about a Wikipedia table of contents that made me sad. I spent 3 months learning about a film of 2 women kissing in the 1800s. I'll admit it's kind of obsessive, but to me, that's the most satisfying way to engage with art. I know it's not the only way, or even necessarily the right way, but I get so much out of it. My favorite writers and filmmakers have really helped me understand the world and decide what kind of person I want to be. The wiki wants to connect people with creative movements that resonate deeply, that they can feel in their bones. That's a solid goal, and a huge free wiki is a good way to get people there. But if a creative sensibility is going to be a big part of your life, you want it to have a little more substance. It has to be adaptable to lots of different situations. It has to have something to say. And most importantly, I think it should fuel you. There's no doubt in my mind that art has that power. But with the kinds of aesthetics that circulate online, based on a single feeling or even a single object, I don't know how you get there. Some of them are solid, but most of the time, all a page did was make me think, hey, I know that style, or hey, I should dress like that. For what it's worth, I'm sure lots of people feel connections to online aesthetics and think about them deeply. I'm sure basically everyone has interesting things to say about the art they love, but the communities where modern aesthetics thrive are structured around quick, shallow content consumption. To me, that seems like it would create weak bonds and brief scenes with no staying power. And you do see some of that. I mean, on TikTok, some aesthetics go in and out of fashion so fast no one can keep up. But credit where credit's due, a surprising amount of new aesthetics stick around for years, despite seeming to me pretty insubstantial. Some aesthetics have hardcore adherence, with communities in the hundreds of thousands. I had a hard time squaring this with my preconception. If these aesthetics offer so little substance, why are people so attached to them? What keeps them coming back? I think I get it now, but the answer doesn't feel good. I'm going to take a step back and talk about vibes culture at large. After all, the cultural shift towards vibes is much bigger than the Aesthetics Wiki, where its most loyal adherents live. I doubt most of the people implicated in this shift consider themselves to be members of the movement. It touches basically every social media platform and every website aimed at young people. I feel like I might be aging myself there. Do young people still use websites? The culture around identifying and naming aesthetics works to keep each one as one-dimensional as possible. Everything in a new category should look exactly like this or make you feel exactly like that. A lot of them fail to be so evocative, but this is generally the aim. The biggest names in vibes culture are defined by a single, unmistakable look and feel. In contrast, older aesthetics were a little more malleable. Like, you can be punk while wearing a flannel or a t-shirt or a suit, because punk is more about the ethos. A modern aesthetic is harder to recontextualize or subvert, because the second you present it in a new light, it no longer fits the definition, and it has to be spun off into a new word. As a result, a lot of these supposed subcultures are unwieldy and hard to partake in. Take, for example, the night lux aesthetic that did the rounds on TikTok last year. If you're not familiar, night lux is about being a beautiful woman out on the town in a big city. Its fixtures are champagne and black dresses, not those black dresses, unfortunately. Night lux is often defined in opposition to the sunnier, that girl aesthetic, like in this entry from the Aesthetics Wiki.
Okay, this is taking me a second because I'm not sure I understand the syntax of the sentence. Night lux is going out on a luxury night summarized. A little note that you could know is that it's not about what you wear, it's about where you go. EX, New York, Montreal, Toronto, London. Usually people who like the night lux aesthetic tend to go to places like diva bars, fancy restaurants, etc. This aesthetic is linked with the that girl aesthetic since they're both linked in the cool girl branch but completely different. Nightlux promotes abundance and self-elitism, while that girl promotes culture and health.
I feel like this gives Toronto a lot of credit. And no, I don't know what a diva bar is. But anyway, last year, Bustle magazine highlighted a video by the influencer Lucy Jane that's about how she can quote-unquote do both. That is, the that girl aesthetic in the morning and night lux later on. Look, I'm a big fan of women, right? I never want to stop a woman from working out or dressing up fancy. That's unconscionable. But I'm sorry, these are the same thing. A rich woman in a big city at noon is not meaningfully different from a rich woman in a big city at midnight. They're driven by the same values and sensibilities. In this case, they are literally the same person. The only thing that changed in those 12 hours is what time it was. People draw a distinction online because one aesthetic is morning themed and the other is night themed. But applying that logic to an entire human life makes no sense because sometimes it's day and sometimes it's night. A lot of these lifestyle-centered aesthetics are so inflexible, they aren't really possible offline. They can't be embodied in daily life. Like, you can't be that girl all the time because no one wants to eat a smoothie bowl at 7 p.m. You can't be a night lux girl all the time because the whole vibe goes up in smoke at sunrise. And I don't think there's any aesthetic way to, sit on the toilet or go to the doctor. Our lives are so much more varied than these posts let on. The division between these two sides only makes sense if your aesthetic has no grounding in the physical world and instead plays out entirely in mood boards and short loopable videos. A blog or an account of short loopable videos can absolutely be dark and luxurious and partying all the time. As a type of person, Nightlux is incoherent, but as a type of post, it makes perfect sense. When Nightlux was at its peak, we didn't see a huge resurgence of women dressing in black and going to expensive clubs. What we did see is millions of people watching Nightlux videos, and some fraction of them presumably buying Nightlux clothing. It was a content trend, same as basically every aesthetic that's emerged in the last few years. Cottagecore is a genre of post. Liminal space is a genre of post. Fruitiger Arrow is a genre of post. Even the people most deeply entrenched in these scenes aren't living them as a daily reality. With this in mind, the hyper-specificity of new aesthetic labels starts to make more sense. The point of these labels is to facilitate the spread of content. If an aesthetic has a name, you can look it up, you can tag it in your posts, and so on. Inflexibility is kind of the point, because that makes it easy to find exactly the vibe you're looking for when you're in the mood. We categorize basically everything like this online, not because it's how cultural movements work, but because it makes our world more legible to search engines and recommendation algorithms. So while I stand by my take that aesthetics culture is bad for art, ultimately, it's not even about art. It's a content marketing strategy. We live in the time of a million niches, and if you're a content creator, working in one is a surefire way to boost your profile. On its own, I don't think this is the biggest deal. I mean, I think it's kind of depressing, but I realize not everyone consumes art the way I do. Most, normal, well-adjusted people like having a steady stream of content that finds them, makes them feel nice, and gets out. And for those people, this granular way of categorizing art is actually pretty ideal. Here's where I have a problem. These new aesthetic groupings are dishonest. They don't admit that they exist for content sorting purposes and not to describe human lifestyles. Despite being largely unattainable, most of the aesthetics popping up lately are really aspirational. A huge draw of aesthetics content is watching people live your dream life and being able to live it vicariously for a second. The truth is, those people aren't living your dream life. I've worked for lifestyle influencers before. They're miserable. They're constantly stressing. I think most people realize this stuff is contrived, but for whatever reason, the illusion still works. Guy Debord's 1970 book, The Society of the Spectacle, opens with 34 short statements about the roles of media under capitalism. The second one reads as follows.
The entire life of societies in which modern conditions of production reign announces itself as an immense accumulation of spectacles. Everything that was directly lived has moved away into a representation.
People are attached to aesthetics because of what they represent. In many cases, abundant lives, self-confidence, escape. These videos and posts make a strong case that if only you would eat the right foods or wear the right clothes, your life would be perfect. It probably goes without saying, but these aspirational aesthetics overwhelmingly target young women. On the Aesthetics Wiki, by far the most common kind of aesthetic is feminine. I tagged no fewer than 90 pages that way. For reference, the second place was nature with 55, and masculine was in 15th place. When I say feminine, I mean things that are aimed at women by the mainstream. Some are a little edgy maybe, but few if any are truly subversive. They're mostly about being docile, wearing pink, being slim yet curvy, and making it look like you're not trying at all. What bothers me here is that many of these aesthetics demand constant striving to reach, but a person can never actually arrive at them. You can never just be that girl. You have to work out 5 days a week and watch what you eat for the rest of your life, and even then, sometimes you'll sleep or work or get sick. You just can't embody the thing. It's formed by static pieces of content, and human lives just aren't static. That's what keeps us hooked on vibes culture. See what I spent as an English major in the big city. See what I cooked on my perfect little farm. It's a dream that life could be so simple. Regular people have thoroughly internalized the logic of branding and have started turning their own lives into content. On a day-to-day level, that means sharing your life selectively in a way that builds a personal brand. But on a deeper level, I mean thinking of your whole life as something as cohesive as a piece of content. There's a social pressure to mold your life and your appearance to be about something, in the way that content is about something. The machine excels at imitating humanity, so humans have started imitating the machine. Last year, Olive Potemsi published an article for theface.com in which she interviewed Toni Thorn, a scholar of new language. Here's a snippet from that interview, presented without comment.
Contrary to what you might think, this hyper-awareness of our personal brands might actually be a good thing. It's empowering because people borrow these notions from marketing, says Thorn. People realize that they could empower themselves, that there's actually no barrier between a commercial exploitative brand and a personal identity brand. The things operate in very similar ways. And even you can exploit both of them to make money. Breaking that barrier between brand commodification, which used to be done by governments or companies, and the commodification of ideas and trends is something that anybody can do.
Well, as a woman of personal brand experience, let's consider how this actually plays out. In trying to understand how you come off to others, you learn to watch yourself as an outsider. Lifestyle bloggers give you permission by saying you just personally value looking good. They call it self-care, but it feels more like self-surveillance. You see yourself through the eyes of other people, constantly anticipating how they might read you. It tugs at the thread of your character and unspools you into a heap of symbols. It's this twisted kind of empathy that somehow makes you feel less human. Does anyone else find themselves scrolling their own Instagram page to see how they come across as strangers? I'm embarrassed to say it out loud, but I end up doing this like once a week, maybe. Since I have total control over how I present on there, I feel a lot of pressure to do it right. Like, can people tell I'm good at this, but not so good that it takes effort? Do I come off as the kind of person I want to be? Turns out my Instagram just has like 26 pictures, and most of them are of buildings I like, so that's no help. Marketing simplifies things to make them sound appealing. It isn't meant to contain them in their totality. If you're trying to sell like a soft drink, that's one thing. But if you're trying to sell yourself, trying to make people like you, I think it's dehumanizing. Understanding the world as a collection of aesthetics, of brands, instead of a series of philosophies and power struggles, means focusing on how things appear and not how or why they work. It's bad enough to think about art this way, but thinking about yourself this way is a real disaster, because it means neglecting what drives you, what fulfills you, what makes you human. The invented lifestyles of these aesthetics offer no path to embodiment, because they aren't designed for those of us with bodies. They're designed for TikTok and hashtags and the wiki. Let's take another look at my first question. Why did vibes culture start now and not 40 years ago?
The man Separated from his product, himself produces all the details of his world with ever-increasing power, and thus finds himself ever more separated from his world. The more his life is now his product, the more he is separated from his life.
In many countries, the social fabric is wearing thin. People have fewer friends, less leisure time, and less access to public space. Politicians have levied the pandemic to enforce policies that alienate us even further. Some of them have been necessary evils, others less necessary evils, mostly implemented to cut costs. Rest and stability and local community are fundamental human needs that help us understand our place in this world. And in this, I'm just going to say it, in this neoliberal hellscape, a lot of young people grew up without ever knowing these comforts, ever being able to rely on them. Instead, many young people have adopted the internet as their main social space. I've talked about this before, and I don't think we should underestimate its impact. The less grounding you have in a physical community, the more your image of the broader world will be informed by the internet, its humor, its values, its social structures. But browsing the internet doesn't give you a cross-section of the human experience. It's one of the most solitary experiences possible, fine-tuned to each user's wants and needs. By far the most common action we take online is consuming, be it news or videos or anything else. As a result, if the internet is where you start developing an identity, you're likely to define yourself not as a community member, but as an individual consumer of posts, of media, of content. If you are in community online, it's probably because you like consuming the same things. This is the basis for fandom. What we consume has become shorthand for what we are, and the act of consuming, all by itself, has been held up as a reasonable foundation for a person's identity. For example, on the Aesthetics Wiki, which I haven't mentioned in a while, this thing kind of got away from me. On the Aesthetics Wiki, I found no fewer than 10 aesthetics centered entirely around collecting as many things as possible. There's crowcore, about gathering shiny things from nature, plant mom, about collecting houseplants, not caring for them or learning about them, mind you, just collecting them. The wildest one has got to be dragoncore, which is about hoarding treasure, as if dragons are like the good guys in all those stories about how they hoard treasure. Woof. We didn't get here overnight. The public going from considering themselves workers to considering themselves consumers happened over the last, 70 years. But that mindset has spread a lot, and it's kicked into overdrive with the internet and the pandemic. That's why we have the Aesthetics Wiki now and only now. That's why Gen Z's most potent art movement is less about art and more about the thrill of consumption. That's how you get a community made up of people scrolling their phones in isolation. Even though the Aesthetics Wiki isn't trying to sell you anything, it ends up reproducing the same dynamic as basically all aspirational content under capitalism, making you want to have things you can't have or be a person you can't be. I can't begrudge anyone for trying to make sense of art or the internet or the times we're living through, but vibes culture just isn't the way.
Top of the pops, let's go. Ain't about the cha-chang, cha-chang. Ain't about the bubbling, wanna make the world dance. Forget about the break it down. Money.
If you like cool stuff made by indie creators, I have a couple recommendations to throw your way. First up, a video called Why Are Disney Adults by my dear friend LowSpecAlex. It tries to explain why so many grown-ups identify so strongly with the Disney brand and explores what that means for art appreciation. If you like this video, it's almost guaranteed you'll like that one. Second, you might already know about this, but Abigail Thorn of PhilosophyTube just put out a play she created called The Prince. Now, as of me filming this, it hasn't actually come out. I've only seen the trailer, but I'm told it has, quote, sword fighting, lesbianism, Hamlet, and disappointed parents. I'm really looking forward to it. It got great reviews, won a bunch of awards, and just like Lola's Disney Adults video, it's an exclusive on Nebula. Nebula is the creator-owned streaming service that me and Abigail and Lola and a bunch of other creators are helping to build. It has all of our videos without any sponsors or ads, plus a ton of original content that wouldn't work on YouTube. I'm really grateful it exists. It helps us branch out and try new things. We've got a new offer going. If you sign up with my link, you get free access to Nebula classes, which are great if you're any kind of creative person. Nebula creators host classes on filmmaking, music, storytelling, the works. They're very insightful. If you sign up for Nebula with my link, you can get all that for as little as $2.50 a month and support creators like me while you're doing it. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. I hope you liked this one. This is shaping up to be a big year for the channel. We're going to be looking at pop feminism, more gender and social media stuff. It's a lot. I'm very excited about it. And if you want to keep tabs, see how my work is coming, feel free to sign up for my Patreon for as little as $3 a month. Patrons get access to my production diary, they get their names in the credits, and they also get early access to all my videos. Although I'm also doing that on Nebula now. And now, before my voice gives out for good, because Jesus, I've been filming for 4.5 hours. I better thank the patrons. So, a big thanks to the following patrons: Ivy, Izzy, Talia Parkinson, Vivian, June Safri, Non-Anonymous, Rhea Chappell, Sina Carey, Cannon, Callan, Duck Grows Chilies, Ellie K, Samari Braley, Clara Griffin, MJ is gay for Spider-Gwen. Ah, that's a new one. Love it. Dr. Haley Isabella Colley, Visprin Dojos, Linda Jewers, Noah Dversal, Nick Mugio, Emma Casley, Harmony, Sasha Karbachinsky, Megahertz, Mid-Tier Art, Amelia G, Jade Persuades, Smaz Ruby, Sandy Smith, Lofty, Darla Butler, Square 44, Momo, The Recognition Scene, Morgan Batan, Colin Coltrera, Taylor Hardy, Ricka Coy, Matilde, ZHL, Aaron Laura, Quillworth, Jane Malcolm, Chloe Jane, Jessie Rayner Bloodgood, Fly Girl, Gwen Loftman, Gia Marina Katarina Santa Lucia, Summer D, Leighton Maylee, Rachel Ann, Celeste Blossom. Jeez. It's a good problem to have. Caroline Matheson, Cassie, Joel Durham, Tyler Bloom, Olivia Grimes, Wimbledimble, Frogsmore, Zara Julia, Kiki, Alejandro Hernandez, Guillaume, Detective Meow Meow, Blueberry Hill, Manuel Feeman, Erica Peterson, Fox Auslander, Kaylin Aaron, Shadow Disorder, Joe Liss, Scatterflower, Cora Lee, Dan Lizotte, Maddie Mamode, Henry Rachutin, River, Lillian, Emily Martins, Jem Altieri, Charlie H, Charlie B, Callie Jennings, Catherine Ann McCloskey Ross, Tracy Runan Tell, Jesse Earl, Conna Q, Quinn Osgood, Lee Sloth Pope, Caitlin, Cersei Quake, Rose Juliet, Wesley Potts, Arden Quartz, Escher, Mary Wishart, Alexia Waltz, Scott Sometimes Lucy, The Numeral 1, Benjamin Stone, Spencer Anderson McGilligot, Rosedale, and finally Hannah Leischnetz. See, I usually do like a funny little quirky little thing to reward you for sticking around this long. Kind of drawn a blank here. Let me just, I don't know how this is gonna go. I don't even really know where I'm taking it. Okay. Thanks.